proceed as directed in camera on the sale of property matter.
Staff proceed as directed in camera on the sale of property.
Yes. Is there any discussion? All right, voting is now open. Voting is now closed.
Oh, sorry.
And the motion is carried. Thank you. Okay, and we have one other outstanding item on our agenda, and that is the Code of Conduct. Councillor Maxwell.
Okay, I've done my red lines, so they're all here. And it's unfortunate that we weren't able to, through our CAO, sit down and go through the policy and make some revisions. But that doesn't solve the issues for me that have been ongoing for several months now. And I believe this is the venue where we're supposed to bring up issues that need to be addressed or things that are on our minds. So the Municipal Government Act, Section 3J, makes provisions under Section 23A and Section 408AB for municipalities to develop their own code of conduct. And we have a code of conduct. It's policy G16. We've made no revisions to it so far. So we have a code of conduct. It was made before we ever came, and it's one that we swear that we're going to follow and so on. And we've learned at our conference sessions, or at least I have, that each municipal unit is encouraged to have a code of conduct. There is not, at the present time, a standard code of conduct for all municipal units. That would be nice, but it hasn't happened. It's like a discipline policy at school. For years and years and years, each school had to have their own discipline policy until finally the province came in with a discipline policy. But we don't have that yet. We are to develop, which we've done, and enforce our own code of conduct. Recently, the town of Wolfville has enforced their code of conduct, and as well the city of Halifax seemed to be able to enforce their code of conduct. The so-called teeth of the code of conduct lies with us and only with us. I worked in a government institution for 35 years, and we were directed by an act. It was called the Education Act, the same as the Municipal Governance Act. And these acts provide a working framework by which the organization does their business. But they're written with the assumption that there would be some flexibility to them and that we would use our discretion when we're dealing with it with an act. Those sections, Section 23A and 408AB, provide the opportunity for the flexibility under which we would deal with code of conduct. In October, I submitted 2 separate violation reports of the code of conduct. One, as we know, was I brought it up, was concerning violations that I felt had been made by Councillor John Andrew, and it was delivered to the mayor. And the other one concerned violations that I felt had been committed by the mayor, and it was delivered to the deputy mayor. And neither of these have been addressed according to our policy G16. Instead, various roadblocks have been thrown up to prevent action from being taken. The most serious of these being that the investigation of any such reports would have to be done in a public session. I am absolutely sure that investigations of this type do not need to be done in public format. There is no organization that conducts these types of investigations in public. The police do not conduct their investigations in public, and neither do any other government institutions or businesses. Schools don't do it, hospitals don't do it, community service organizations, I could go on and on. The announcement that an investigation is taking place would be made in public, and the results of such an investigation would be made in public. But the investigation itself is never done in public. Provision is made in the MGA with the term personnel for us to meet out of the public eye to deal with such matters. Personnel is a word that we can define in several different ways, and that's where I mean that we have to use our discretion. We are certainly personnel. We're a group of people doing an undertaking. So we're personnel, and we have that option and that flexibility to do this. Another roadblock is having policy discussions done in an open session, so that we would have to go over these red lines in an open session, point by point by point. So far in our term, we have done various and numerous policy changes in which we have never had those policies scrutinized in a public session. Having and enforcing a code of conduct is very important for any organization today. Otherwise, there's no accountability for behavior amongst the members. This can cause many problems to arise within an organization, some of which I feel we've experienced. For example, a lack of trust. Basically, when there's no accountability, I can sit here and be as bad as I want, knowing full well that based on our recent inaction with the code of conduct, nothing's going to happen to me. I can sit here and lie. I can misrepresent facts. I can bully and harass. I can slander my colleagues, and so on. I can do all of that, and we've seen that. I believe as a council, we need to decide if we are going to enforce our code of conduct, G16, as it is written, and hold each other accountable for our behaviors. That being said, I'd like to make a motion that this council agrees that having and enforcing our code of conduct is important for accountability, and that we will follow the code of conduct according to the process that is laid out in G16. I so move.
Kathy, can I ask you to read that again?
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
That council agrees that having and enforcing our code of conduct is important for accountability, and that we will follow the code of conduct policy according to the process that is laid out in policy G16.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you.
We have a motion that has been moved and seconded, and we'll open the floor for discussion. But prior to doing so, I would like to make a few corrections to what the councillor has put before you. The current Town of Kentville Policy Statement G16 was actually created on March the 6th, 2017. It came before this council, or it was approved on, it came before this council for the first time on February 13th, 2017. And then it came back to our next CAC on March the 6th, 2017. It then came to our CAC on October 10th, 2017, and then in April of 2018. On April 24th of 2017, it was actually ratified by this council. Annually, each one of us signs a commitment to our code of conduct, saying that we will commit to adhering to the code of conduct and to faithfully fulfill all responsibilities of our office. Every code of conduct that has come before this council or that has been made against this council has been investigated. And it has been investigated as per this policy. And it also states very clearly that if the investigation finds a member has breached a provision of the code, council may impose corrective action commensurate with the nature and severity of the breach, which may include formal warning or reprimand to the member. It also states that the mayor should ask the CAO and/or the town solicitor to investigate the allegations and report those findings to the mayor. And it is the mayor's responsibility to take the next appropriate action. And these actions can include, but not limiting to, discussing and counseling the individual on the violations, recommending sanctions to the full council to consider in public meeting, or forming a council ad hoc subcommittee to review the allegations, the investigations, and its finding, as well as to recommend sanctions, options for council consideration. And I'll go back to paragraph 4.13, where it speaks that the mayor should point out the offending council member infraction of code of conduct, and if the offense continues, that the matter should be discussed in private with the offending councillor by the mayor. It has been my action, and perhaps that is where it's wrong, is to discuss issues in private with members of this council. And if I had to put on the table the number of code of conduct issues that have been reported by the public, Councillor Maxwell, you would lead by a great amount. There have been more. I
find that humorous.
I'm sure you must.
Yeah, because you've never run them by me.
Yes, they have been run by
No,
you.
they haven't been run by me. Not numerous haven't been run by me.
In typical fashion, you're rude and obnoxious in a meeting. How many times have I said to you, and you threw Robert's rules in my face again today at the beginning of this meeting, and yet each time you get the floor, you refuse to address the chair.
I address the chair every time I press my buzzer.
No, you don't.
Yes, I do. That's me asking to speak, and when you acknowledge me, that's my right to talk.
No, it isn't.
But in your book.
Well, then that's what it comes down to, is what it's in whose book.
And I would look at corrective action 4.151, where it mentions that the CAO is involved in making a decision here. And it says, basically, if the violation of the code is outside the observed behaviors of the mayor and or council members, the alleged violation should be referred to the mayor or CAO. That's if it's something that's outside of the viewing or the listening of the council. So a council cannot make a decision. In section 4.13.
So your interpretation?
It clearly states, it's not my interpretation, it's written right there. If the violation of the code of conduct is outside of the observed behaviors by the mayor or council members, the alleged violation should be referred to the mayor or CAO. Outside of the observed behaviors. All other times, it is the mayor and council that determine what's going to happen on a code of conduct violation. that is in 4.13, I do believe. I can read. I'm well educated, I can read. We have a motion on the floor. Is there any other comments?
I would remind you that you're not the chair here.
Well, Chair is not speeding this up at all.
Oh, and so that's where we're going, is this has to be speeded up?
Well, you're giving false information. I'm reading right out of this document. And
Councillor
you're telling
Maxwell.
me that all that your dealings with the code of conduct violations was by you and the CAO. This council was able to observe the behaviors that you dealt with. When those are observed behaviors, the council is to weigh in on the code of conduct violation, not the mayor and CAO.
Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just had two changes. So I know there's a motion on the floor, but there were two very, very minor changes that I wanted to make in it, and I'll just say them very quickly.
All right.
Under 3.3.0, 3.1, under scope, it says the public expects the highest standards of professional conduct from members elected to local government. This policy applies to all elected officials of the town of Kentville and town of Kentville appointed citizen committee members. Then the very last sentence says, this policy does not apply to debate and council proceedings. I actually was looking to take that last sentence out. I'm not sure why it was there. But anyway, that's that. And then 4.4 says council members seeking information from staff will do so through the office of the CAO. So maybe it's not exactly that, but in the past, what I had done is I would send a note to Director Gentleman or Director Wynot, and I would always copy the CAO. So maybe that's, and I think that's acceptable. So if that is, then it should be reflected there.
Okay.
Those were just my two red lines.
Okay.
That's all I had.
All right. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I sent out in an email, I think it was last week, I think other municipalities are doing it, but I think we should send a letter to the province and tell them that they need to get their stuff together in regards to lax policies on code of conduct. But I will say this in my defense of being accused of not doing anything having to do with, I did receive from Councillor Maxwell documentation of code of conduct violation on the mayor. I met with Councillor Maxwell and 3 other councillors. We had a discussion about a meeting, and I was not asked to do an investigation. I was asked to call a meeting, but if the meeting had to be not in camera or was not allowed to be in camera, I was told to drop it. So that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bolland.
My email to all of us days ago to suggest that we have this discussion in a workshop format was for exactly the reasons I meant, but here we are. So it was reported in the paper just days ago that the province is actually working and reviewing code of conduct policy, and Mayor Mood, our chair of NSFM, actually reported that. So something is coming, hopefully within months, but the province and Mayor Mood are working on something with a bit more strength in it than what's currently available. So,
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Andrew.
If I may, just with regard to the line that distinguishes the behavior of an appointed official or an elected official, in council chambers, I think there's a reason for that being there, because this is a forum in which debate is entitled to get heated. Right? This is kind of where democracy happens. Now, there still is a measure of decorum, but I would certainly hope that what we just witnessed wouldn't happen on the street or in another setting, but it may or may not be appropriate here. Having been the lone subject for a long time of this, until you became part of that club, Mayor Snow, I was one of the reasons why I was the club of those accused. One of the reasons why it was interesting to me is it seemed that there was a number of infractions or reported infractions and a number of complaints about councillors, and I was not the only one, but I'm the only one who's been dragged on the floor repeatedly over the last year. And so, and what's interesting as we wait to find out, and I hate to bring it up, but we wait to find out whether the Attorney General is going to proceed with an investigation of 2 members of our council, including Councillor Maxwell. So as it's like the bank robber pointing the finger at the kid who stole bubble gum. I mean, it just it's insane. And here we are at a new year, and there's a determination on Councillor Maxwell's part to make this a miserable experience for yet another year. And that is so disappointing, because I felt like we went in with our strategic planning. It was so positive. It felt so good. We came out of Christmas, and I think I expected fully, let's finish this thing strong. Let's finish this thing well. I felt that was the tone of our strategic planning, and here we are back here again, and it's nonsense. It's just nonsense.
Thank you. Thank you. And one thing, that the session that we were supposed to have today, starting at 4:30, was a public meeting. It was not going to be closed. It was nothing was being put under. It was just going to give us time. It was going to give us an hour and a half that we could sit down and discuss this. To put this at the end of the agenda after 10 o'clock at night, there could be a level of exhaustion and a sense that we're not being productive, and I would hate to think that we're going to rush into changing something to not make it better. This code of conduct was never intended to be about enforcement. It was always intended to be how we would treat each other and how we would come together and how we would work together. So in that way, when you read the words that are in it, have we put things on paper that we don't want to do? Have we made decisions that this is not the way that we want to treat each other? After the first time that the Code of Conduct came up, as I told you in an email to Council and Mayor, and I believe I reported it here in this chamber, is that I had offers of assistance from both the NSFM, from their policy person, and from our DMA representative. They both wanted to help. And when I sent that out, I received an email that said that I had overblown this again and that I had pushed this too far. Well, we had professionals who wanted to help us, who wanted to sit in a room with us and help us. And I was told that that's not the way that it wanted to be done. So instead, we're going back to where we've been for the last 4 years. And it's to the point now where it's at the ridiculous. I'm going to say that no single person can be accuser, judge, jury, and hangman for any accusation brought forward against a person. Yet that is what we're being asked to do, is that one person can make an allegation, and then they can tell you what that allegation means, despite independent review of what has gone on.
That's what the investigation is for. The investigation is an independent review. It's a review-
Counselor Maxwell,
it's a review by the entire council.
you do not have the floor.
And
Counselor Maxwell, you do not have the floor.
conduct at meetings, members shall.
Counselor
So we can't
Maxwell,
say that doesn't apply
Point of
in
order.
council.
thank you. Counselor Maxwell, you have told us that we are not behaving appropriately, yet you sat there
Yeah.
and misbehaved because, of course, nothing is going to happen to you.
Well, because, yes, nothing's gonna happen because nothing has happened, period.
But you've taken
I've been
away from
maligned
us.
by my council, I've been maligned by my mayor, and nothing is happening. So I'm saying, why are we not following the code of conduct that we have in front of us? You don't want to follow it, that's fine, vote down the motion. That's all you have to do. Vote it down. Say, no, we don't believe in the code of conduct, and no, we're not gonna enforce it. Vote it down.
We actually have a code of conduct. I see your light. We actually have a code of conduct. It is in effect. There was a request back in September to modify it. I made those modifications as requested by the deputy mayor. At the time, he wasn't the deputy mayor, but he is now. And that came back, and it was discarded in favor of a working group, which did not occur because we could not get enough people to value having that meeting at 4:30 today. Councillor Pulsifer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I believe there were 3 responses to entertaining the meeting. I suggest that we attempt to reschedule the meeting because there has been a couple red-lined comments made. I had a few changes as well, similar to Councillor Maxwell or Councillor Savage. I think if we could, somehow sit together and do those minor changes. I don't think they were extensive. They weren't readjusting the whole code. I think the code itself, it's there, it flows, but there were a few amendments that, we were given the question, could you change, if you could you change this, excuse me, this or that? I believe and I agree that we should have a code of conduct because that is suggested in the MGA. It's there for a purpose, so I know without any quote enforcement mechanism, then the code is just merely a series of guidelines. There has to be some kind of procedure and consequence established. I mean, that's what the code of conduct endeavors to do. So if we don't have any form of enforcement, then and we can't find some form of enforcement to an alleged breach of code, then there's no point in having the code if it's just some guidelines. We try to operate under the code of conduct, which, I refer to what I heard on the radio the other day, that in Colchester County there was some alleged violation. They don't have a code of conduct. That was said on the news. The county does not have a code of conduct, so they probably were left floundering as to, okay, what do we do now, type of thing. But excuse me. I just think that maybe we should try again to do the red line and somehow be able to manage to establish something to go on that we can enforce a little bit,
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Bolland.
Thank you, and perhaps, thank you, Chair. Maybe we get together, maybe the province and NSFM are going to come down the line with something within 60 days. Maybe we set a deadline up of March 1st, and if they don't have something. Otherwise, we can get together next week over lunch or something, or at 4:30 if we can make it, but then we're going to probably revisit it again because the province will have their version. So, but I know there's suggestions by Councillor Sabat and yourself to tweak a few line items. If that's not acceptable, maybe staff come back to us with the code of conduct currently with these tweaked items that have been brought up, and we take a look at it. But at 10:30 at night, we've got staff here. I think that people like to go home. I think we need to get the information brought back just to take a good logical look at it. Unless you can put it on the screen, but I mean, some people have to work tomorrow.
Okay, thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. If there is an appetite to read, I would, for one, would like the help of people who've dealt with this before. Otherwise, it's the same 7 people, 8 people, 9 people sitting in a room talking about stuff we've talked about for 3 years.
Okay.
If the offer still stands. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Well, we still have a motion on the table that has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? I'm going to need you to read the motion, please.
So moved by Kathy and seconded by Councillor Pulsifer. The motion is that council agrees that having and enforcing our code of conduct is important for accountability, and that we will follow the code of conduct according to policy G16. Is that correct?
All right, did you put it up? Voting is now open. Voting is now closed. And the motion passes.
I have a second motion I'd like to make. And this will end what I feel about it. Second motion is that council will apply policy G16 following the process therein to the 2 violations already reported and any future violations brought forward.
No, I don't want that motion. You're calling them violations.
All right, I'll change that word. Council will apply policy G16 following the process therein to the 2 reports already submitted and any future reports brought forward.
Just, I don't know whether there's a seconder yet. I have,
There is no seconder.
so has it failed for lack of a seconder?
No, it hasn't, I
Okay,
haven't
so
called for
I'm
a
just gonna
seconder yet.
comment. This motion assumes that the policy hasn't been applied to the 2 reports already submitted.
Which is
And-
incorrect.
And there is dispute as to the factual basis for that, so there's a problem putting that on the floor. There would have to be a challenge to what the mayor's reported are the facts, that the mayor's reported the policy has been applied to the 2 reports. And so there's a real problem with the
There is a
motion
real problem.
itself and how you would move that forward.
Okay, what do you suggest?
I've heard a lot of allegations, and if council feels like something hasn't been done properly, council should ask staff to investigate and report back to council, and staff, the CAO, and the CAO can engage the solicitor to give a legal opinion and determine what the facts were. The CAO wasn't here at the time that any of this happened, as far as I know. hearing things tonight, some of which is new, a lot of which I've heard before. But I've never been asked to investigate what's occurred or what hasn't occurred. I've had some discussions with the mayor at several points along the way. So my suggestion would be that if council as a whole wants staff to look at at whether the policy's been applied correctly, that council would give staff that direction, and that anything that might arise from that would wait until then. It sounds like it may or may not be relevant depending what other steps happen in the meantime as well.
So by staff, you're referring to the CAO?
To the CAO.
So we have, so I submitted 2 reports. I can resubmit those 2 reports to the CAO.
No, but it would have to be, my suggestion would be that the CAO would take instruction from all the council, so you'd put a motion on the floor
Okay.
asking council to support a resolution that that the CAO investigate report back to council whether the policy was applied to those 2 reports.
Okay.
And then the CAO would investigate based on whatever information is available.
So if I say I'll move for council to support a resolution to have the CAO investigate the 2 reports
It's really whether the policy was applied to the 2 reports.
to see if the policy was applied. Is that okay?
That could be a motion.
That can be a motion.
Can you read it back
So I move
first?
that council support a resolution to investigate the 2 reports to determine if the policy was applied.
No,
I
no.
have for council to direct the CAO to investigate whether the policy was applied to the 2 reports which were submitted.
And I
That's
guess-
fine, that's fine.
And I guess I should interject, because we are at CAC, and so is this a recommendation to council, or is this a request by CAC to the CAO? I think you intended
Yes.
to be a request by CAC to the CAO.
Yeah.
Yes.
Report back to CAC.
Yes.
Can you repeat that back now, Jennifer, please?
Sure, no problem.
Mhm.
For council to direct the CAO to investigate.
CAC to direct,
For
sorry.
CAC to direct the CAO to investigate whether policy G16, I think,
Mhm.
was applied to the 2 reports that were submitted, and that the CAO report back to CAC.
All right, so it's been moved by Councillor Maxwell, seconder.
Second.
Councillor Pulsifer.
Do you want to vote on this?
No, we're going to discussion first. Councillor Bolland.
Thank you, Worship. That's I lit myself up earlier.
Yeah, yes, yes.
To get a legal opinion, because we're getting to murky, gray areas here, personalities. I hear the motion, but again, the motion is based on, was there wrongdoing? But anyway, it's good democracy. We're talking.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Andrew.
Is there any reason why we can't, why I couldn't ask for an amendment that there's review of every complaint during our time of council? If we're going to be retroactive, and even though I apologized at this table, I've apologized in our former CAO's office, I'm being told that that's not good enough. So where do we stop? And so what I would ask is that we amend the motion, and we ask our CAO to waste her precious time, and to review all of the list of alleged violations of our code of conduct. Where else do we go with it? Oh, God.
You would be surprised. Councillor Savage.
So in terms of the motion, when the reference is made to 2 reports, assuming everybody's read the 2 reports,
That's a good point. It has to be clear what 2 reports
Right.
we're talking about. I assumed that it was clear what 2 reports, but if council's not clear what 2 reports based on the resolution, then
the one.
Councillor Bolland.
Mayor, so you just suggested seconds ago that there was a report.
these were I think they've been called reports, but they're
Yeah.
really complaints.
Yeah.
Okay, I know I've personally not read any documented complaints or anything, but maybe I wasn't privy to.
So,
Well, I submitted them to the people that I was supposed to submit them to.
I have not read 2.
unless it's clear what those are, and maybe it is, and maybe it's not, maybe Councilor Maxwell can clarify that, then it's a resolution I would think would be problematic to support. But if it can be made clear what those 2 complaints were,
They
and
were,
perhaps there were dates associated with them, or
Yes.
something else.
There
that-
were.
that
They were
makes it
extensive.
Clear, what they were. I think it seems to me that everybody at least has a general sense of what we're talking about, if not a specific sense. And the resolution is intended to be that those 2 complaints that Councilor Maxwell made are the 2 that are being investigated. Now, it needs to be clear what those 2 were, so that the CAO knows what she's looking at. So I don't know whether Councilor Maxwell's in a position, or if anybody else is in a position to clarify.
I have copies of them. If you want me to read them, I can. This is exactly why I didn't want to do this in a public format. I can send them to the CAO. I can send them to everybody on council.
But, so if I might ask a couple questions, just to clarify, who were the 2 complaints submitted to?
One was to the mayor.
And do you have a date?
And I addressed that in open council.
One's to the mayor on a certain
On
date.
October 10th, 2019.
Okay. And the other one?
And the other one was to the deputy mayor on October 29th, 2019.
So, from my perspective, that confirms what Councilor Maxwell is referring to. Whether council is prepared to support the resolution falls on each of you.
Deputy Mayor, your light is on. I don't know if I missed you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Worship. The CAO does have a copy of the complaint that I was given.
Motion again, is it the date?
Not yet, not yet. Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Worship. So would it make sense if all of council hasn't read the 2 reports, that we read them, that we know the content? I don't know, I'm kind of at a loss for that part. But one report's been submitted, but the other one wasn't?
2 have been submitted.
They're complaints. So,
Okay.
the ask is to have the CAO, if I may put it in a nutshell, the ask is to have the CAO investigate whether the policy was applied to those 2 complaints. And so, I would suggest that from council's perspective, you either want the CAO investigating that, or you are satisfied with what you've heard and you don't want the CAO investigating that. And it matters not what was in the complaint.
Councillor Ballin.
I can't make a judgment call on if it was applied or not if I don't have the evidence in front of me to read what the crime was, so to speak, so.
That's what the CAO is going to do. She's going to investigate.
But out of respect of her time, if I have a vote here, and I do, I like to know what the complaint is, other than what I've heard verbally, to read it. To justify in my mind that I'm going to take her time to review it, etc., to see if it's justified.
But she's not reviewing the complaint. She's reviewing that the process was followed in resolving the complaint.
My concern is if the complaint is valid and what is the meat and potatoes of the complaint.
Okay.
That's all.
Could you read the motion, please?
For CAC to direct the CAO to investigate whether the policy G16 was applied to the two reports that were submitted October 10th, 2019 and October 29th, 2019. And that the CAO report back to CAC.
Is there any further discussion? Councillor Savage.
Thank you, Your Worship. So just so I have it straight in my head, regardless of the content of the two submissions, it's around ensuring that the proper procedure was followed with respect to the two reports. It's hard to decision on that when you don't know the content of both reports.
Well, I think the deputy
believe I know
mayor
one.
explained what happened with the report that he was given.
So I was given a report.
Yes.
I had a discussion with several councillors. I was not asked to do an investigation. I was asked to call a meeting. However, when I left, I said, these meetings cannot be held in camera. They have to be in public. I said, what would you like me to do if the meeting can't be held in camera? And I was told, let it die, I believe was the exact. Because I'm one of the accused, I'll be abstaining from whatever vote we have.
Your abstinence is a no. Councillor Andrew.
So if I'm to understand correctly, there was not a meeting. This would be with regard to the complaint around you, Mayor Snow?
You and I weren't involved in that.
No, but it's actually not even, you can't have a council meeting and not invite members of council. So I'd be interested to know what happened in that meeting, and in fact could call point of privilege. You can't do that. You can't have a meeting and only invite the councillors you like. Anyway, I'll leave that there.
Okay.
One more problem that perhaps needs to be reviewed.
All right, is there any further discussion? We'll go for the vote. And the CAO is investigating whether the procedure was followed in accordance with the policy. She is not investigating the complaint. Just that the policy was followed. That's correct. The policy was followed. Voting is now closed. And the motion passes. Do you have any questions, CAO?
Not at this time.
All right,
Thank you, Your Worship.
thank you. Is there any further business? A call for adjournment. Thank you. And a seconder? Thank you. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you.